She's one of the most infamous female prison inmates in America.
I mean, how many average school teachers would go to court for a murder charge? I don't think it's too typical.
Carolyn Warmus, a then 25-year-old school teacher convicted of killing Betty Jeanne Solomon, the wife of her 40-year-old secret lover, Paul Solomon. And now, at age 54, after spending 29 years behind bars, Warmus is fighting to get her hands on the key piece of evidence that could unlock her cell door.
The only thing was mostly the glove.
Just like another historic murder case.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
But will this glove finally acquit Carolyn Warmus too?
Do you think that testing the glove would prove your innocence?
To this day, Warmus maintains her innocence, and now she's sitting down with Crime Watch Daily from behind bars in upstate New York to reveal new details that she claims will finally clear her name.
Do you think he was trying to frame you?
Her sensational case ignited a firestorm of endless screaming front-page headlines and feverish nightly news reports.
The fatal attraction murder trial today.
Portraying Carolyn as a seductive young femme fatale who shot her lover's wife to death in a jealous, bloody fury.
Well, taken all together, obviously, it doesn't portray you well.
Well, nothing in the media portrayed me well. I mean, that, you know, had they just focused on the truth and the facts, you know, it would have been a different story. But I guess that doesn't make a sexy story to sell in the media.
A real-life story that drew comparisons to the movie classic, Fatal Attraction.
Hey, Alex, come on.
Well, this was the Fatal Attraction movie.
But in real life, Carolyn Warmus appeared to be a most unlikely villainess.
You've been described as the type of woman that a man would want to bring home to his mother.
Oh.
Did you consider yourself that way?
That was sweet. Yes, I was like the girl next door.
A millionaire's daughter from Michigan who had gone to the best private schools, graduated from Columbia University in New York City, and was working as an elementary school teacher in upscale Westchester County.
What drove you to do that?
My mom was a school teacher, and education was always very important in our family. And then I loved being around children, so it just sort of seemed like a perfect fit.
But Carolyn admits she indulged in a very different kind of life outside of the classroom, wallowing in the freewheeling excesses of the anything-goes roaring 80s.
I was enjoying myself as a young 23-year-old woman living in Manhattan. In today's day and age, they call it hooking up.
Among the many men in her life was Paul Solomon, an older fellow teacher Carolyn says hit on her soon after they began working together.
Paul Solomon approached me and said a lot of the teachers were getting together to go to a local restaurant, bar, and did I want to go? And I said sure. And the only person who showed up was Paul Solomon.
A married man with a teenage daughter and a reputation as a serial womanizer.
Having relations with colleagues, school teachers, other people.
But Carolyn claims she didn't find out until it was too late.
I was already dating him, and that was certainly a huge mistake by me to continue dating him and to not have ended it right then and there.
Why didn't you break it off at that point?
He said that he had an open marriage, so I just thought this is the way things are in the big city.
And did he ever tell you that he loved you?
Oh, sure. Sure, he wrote cards and everything.
And did you tell him the same?
Mm-hmm.
That you felt the same way?
I did.
Did he lead you to believe that ultimately the two of you would end up together?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. He said after his daughter Kristen finished high school.
Which was how many years away at that point?
At that point, it was like 3 or 4.
Carolyn says Solomon told her his wife was also having an affair with his knowledge and approval.
It turned out to be true because she had been dating a man for 8 years.
Did you ever meet his wife?
We did. We did meet at school functions.
Carolyn says she was even invited to family dinners at the Solomon house.
Wasn't that awkward?
I thought it would be very, very awkward. And Paul sort of encouraged me and said, no, I want you to see how we interact together.
You're sleeping with a man and then having dinner with him and his wife.
It was bizarre.
Because then something else happened. Paul Solomon comes home one night to find his wife Betty Jeanne viciously murdered. He calls police.
The call, from what I remember, was very frantic.
Richard Constantino was the lead detective on the case.
I walk into their apartment, and saw the body of Betty Jeanne Solomon laying face up on the floor in the living room.
Pistol whipped and riddled with bullets, 9 in all, 3 of them in her back.
She was pretty well covered in blood, and her clothes were blood-soaked.
And lying right next to her body is this glove, which police failed to collect as evidence.
Was that a major mistake?
That was an oversight.
One that would come to change the entire course of the case.
Do you think it's odd that a glove was left near the body?
If it's from the killer.
Paul Solomon had just found the bullet-riddled body of his wife, Betty Jeanne, lying on the living room floor of their suburban New York apartment. But lead detective Richard Constantino couldn't understand why Solomon had no blood on him.
Paul Solomon said when he arrived home, she was face down and he rolled her body over.
And Constantino isn't happy to learn that the first police officers at the crime scene had allowed Solomon to wash his hands and change his bloody clothes.
Well, there's a possibility of losing items of evidence, either trace evidence or gunshot residue, especially if you wash your hands.
Sure enough, when Solomon's hands are tested for residue that might have placed the murder weapon in his hands.
Did you find anything?
Didn't find any, no.
But Constantino is still highly suspicious of him.
Our first suspect was Paul Solomon.
Why?
Because he was the last person to see the victim, and he was the one to find the body. He pretty well made himself a suspect by his demeanor, the way he spoke, and to be honest with you, I was really leaning towards him being the shooter.
What was his demeanor like?
He was very sheepish.
And Constantino could understand why, after talking to those who knew him.
As an investigation unfolded, we found out he was, if you want to call it, a serial adulterer. You know, so he had many affairs through the years.
But Solomon gave police a thorough account of what he did the day his wife was murdered.
Woke up in the morning, made love, and he just hung around the house all day long watching TV.
Which his wife, tragically, is no longer alive to verify. But 40-year-old Solomon's 25-year-old lover, Carolyn Warmus, would confirm at least part of what else Solomon told police he did that day.
He received a phone call from Carolyn in the afternoon and made plans to meet her for her birthday later on in the evening.
At a nearby Holiday Inn where they had drinks before Solomon gave her a special birthday present.
And you were intimate in the parking lot,
Right.
in the car,
And he was in my car.
having sex.
Right.
But Paul Solomon still isn't off the hook. Because of the timeline, the medical examiner estimates Betty Jeanne died between 2 and 6 p.m. Police figure her husband had more than enough time to murder her.
We kind of kept him on the top of the list as a suspect.
But something strange would happen hundreds of miles away that suddenly makes Carolyn the focus of the investigation.
I said, whoa, okay, this woman, so Warmus, you know, she's going to extremes here.
Solomon had dumped Carolyn for another female teacher soon after his wife's murder. And police say an insanely jealous and furious Carolyn followed Solomon and his new girlfriend all the way from New York to Puerto Rico, where they had gone for a romantic getaway. Carolyn frantically trying to confront Solomon face to face.
So what happened there in Puerto Rico?
She made numerous phone calls, attempts to his room that he didn't respond to. And when he refused to see her, the security people in hotels said that she was acting strange.
But Carolyn tells an entirely different story.
Were you stalking Paul Solomon?
No. He invited me down to Puerto Rico. I called down there and told him what time my flight was going to be arriving. So, you know, be there to pick me up, but he was pursuing me. And rekindling the relationship, you know, wasn't the other way around.
Solomon and his new girlfriend would flee back to New York, where he tells police Carolyn had made them fear for their safety.
She wanted Paul Solomon, and she's going to go to any extreme to get him.
But Carolyn claims Solomon had lured her into a trap so he could get the heat off himself by portraying her to police as an unstable woman with a fatal attraction so obsessive that she was capable of killing his wife.
Do you think he was trying to frame you?
Absolutely.
So you think this was all a plot by him to drag you into the investigation and
Right.
shift the focus to you?
Absolutely.
And if that was really the plan, it worked.
So now I'm going to give a little bit more credence to her as a suspect.
And police would find a suspicious pattern of behavior when they dug into Carolyn's love life.
She had a proclivity of going after married men, unattainable men.
Among them, they say, was another man who took legal action to stop her from stalking him and his fiancée.
One couple said that they had to get a restraining order against you. Is that true?
Well, we did a reciprocal restraining order that he was not going to come near me, my family, the office, or anything like that. So that's what that was about. Nobody wants to describe it in its entirety.
Police would also uncover other evidence against Carolyn. The most damaging being allegations that she bought a .25 caliber Beretta with a silencer, just like the one used to shoot Betty Jeanne Solomon 9 times. And proof suggesting she purchased bullets for the gun on the very day of the murder. Plus a passionate motive.
What do you think of that motive that the prosecution said you killed Betty Jeanne Solomon because you wanted her husband all to yourself?
Paul Solomon said that he and his wife were planning to get divorced. So what would be the purpose? What would be the gain, the benefit for me? It's not even something that I would consider. I mean, that's like out of a soap opera.
But a year after the murder, police would charge Carolyn with killing Mrs. Solomon, even though they had no physical evidence linking her to the crime.
I would have liked to have a smoking gun. I would have liked to have a signed confession. I would have liked to have a giant stadium filled with witnesses, but we didn't.
And that glove, photographed lying near Mrs. Solomon's body but not collected as evidence, would mysteriously vanish. Her husband, Paul, saying he can't find it in his apartment.
So ultimately, in your case, there was no forensic evidence.
Right.
No eyewitnesses.
Right.
Murder weapon.
Right. It was a completely circumstantial case.
Carolyn Warmus had already been branded the fatal attraction killer in the court of public opinion.
These were the headlines every day, every day.
And Carolyn only feeds the media frenzy when the former elementary school teacher and typical girl next door turns up at her murder trial, looking every bit the part of the femme fatale.
As far as the public's perception was concerned, I'm not sure she presented a very favorable image.
With this infamous photo plastered across every front page in New York City.
The visual image of Carolyn getting out of the limousine with the hat on and the short skirt and the sunglasses may have presented an image of somebody having something to hide, you know, being somewhat mysterious.
Perpetuating the notion that Carolyn is a real-life version of the villainous Glenn Close character in the movie Fatal Attraction, one of the biggest box office hits in history.
Were there any similarities?
He was a married man. That was a similarity.
So what did you think of that comparison, and how much do you think it prejudiced your case?
Oh, I think it was huge prejudice. Huge prejudice. They tried the case in the media.
But Carolyn continues to fuel that prejudice in the courtroom, where she sits silently, head down, back to the camera, as sensational testimony has everyone's head spinning.
I was very friendly with Carolyn. For whatever reason, she pushed the right buttons, or I didn't think properly.
And in a devastating blow to Carolyn's defense, a private detective named Vincent Parco testifies he sold Carolyn a .25 caliber Beretta with a custom-made silencer, just like the weapon police say she used to murder Betty Jeanne Solomon, the wife of her lover Paul. But now Carolyn is telling Crime Watch Daily Parco lied.
Did Vincent Parco ever sell you a gun?
No.
She basically has testified that she never had any need for the gun.
And the private eye would be caught lying to police. He didn't initially tell them that he sold Carolyn a gun.
Did you tell them everything that you knew?
No.
Why not, Mr. Parco?
I was afraid.
Afraid of what at that time?
Well, I realized that I had done something illegal and stupid by selling her a firearm.
The defense claims Parco changed his story to save himself from being prosecuted.
He got complete immunity.
But then the prosecution drops an unexpected bombshell. Phone company records showing a call from Carolyn's home to a gun shop in New Jersey on the very day of the murder.
Did you make that call to Ray's Sports Shop?
No. I don't even know if that call was made.
But the official bill from MCI showed that it came from your home at 3 o'clock. So if you didn't make that call, who did?
And the defense presents a second billing document, mysteriously showing no record of that call at all.
The bill that the prosecution got from the phone company showed that call from your home.
Right, and then the second bill that well, first of all, it wasn't bills, it was like computer records or something that they got. Right, then they got a second statement, which also showed another discrepancy. So they introduced 2 computer copies or something that actually, you know, contradicted themselves. And then there was the hard bill, the printed bill on paper.
One of those bills was a fraud.
Well,
right?
or an error or something.
Carolyn and her defense claim the records were somehow doctored to frame her, but the judge sides with the prosecution, allowing the phone bill showing Carolyn made the call to be entered as evidence. Still, police had no direct evidence to support claims that Carolyn went to the gun shop after that call to buy bullets. But they did find this. The gun shop record showed one of Warmus's co-workers bought bullets the day of the murder. Cops say that co-worker looked like Carolyn Warmus and told them her driver's license had been stolen. But the defense questions that story too.
They weren't even able to determine whether or not the shell casings at the crime scene matched the shell casings that were sold by this gun shop in New Jersey.
Nor could the prosecution find any witnesses.
None of the people in the gun shop, when shown photographs of Carolyn Warmus, were able to identify her as the person who would come into the store that day to purchase any ammunition.
But Parco shocks the courtroom once more when he claims Carolyn actually told him she'd disposed of the murder weapon, which has never been found.
She says, I don't have it anymore, I threw it away. I said, well, where would you throw it? I mean, where would you get rid of it? And she said something to the effect, I threw it away on a parkway, off a parkway.
And what about the gun? Parco said that you had told him that you threw it over a parkway. Did you ever dispose of the gun?
I never had a gun to dispose of.
Then, the defense raises the possibility that the killer may have even been a man, pointing to a phone call made from the Solomon home at the time police say Betty Jeanne was being murdered.
It was a female voice reporting that someone, he or she's trying to kill me.
And the defense suggests that possible he could have been Parco.
They could just as well be reasons for you to kill Betty Jeanne Solomon, right?
Wrong.
Why not?
I don't even know the woman. I would never kill anybody. I never did and never will kill anybody, except in self-defense.
But a truck driver named Antonio Gambino testifies that Parco tried to hire him to commit a murder just before Mrs. Solomon was found shot dead.
I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was the gentleman that came up to my truck.
The defense also accuses lead detective Richard Constantino of failing to thoroughly investigate Parco as a possible suspect.
You searched Parco's office, right?
Yes.
Where's the next logical place to search? His home, right?
Yes.
You didn't do that?
No.
But Constantino says Parco was one of several persons of interest, including Mrs. Solomon's own lover, who had verified alibis.
Everybody was a suspect at the time, but they were eventually ruled out.
Except for Paul Solomon, that is, who had remained the prime suspect for nearly a year before police charged Carolyn with his wife's murder.
My wife and I were having difficult times.
Weren't you angry?
Yeah, I was upset about it, yes.
And Solomon is furious when the defense suggests he too, like Parco, could be her killer.
For you to stand there and say that I could do that to my wife or to anybody is obscene.
The defense continues to attack him.
Mr. Solomon, you have no idea who was in that house that killed your wife, right?
And that ignites a fiery exchange.
I'm not really concerned what you believe. I know what my family and friends and people that know me believe.
And your family and your friends are the people over the years you've had occasion to look in the eye and lie to, right?
Objection, Judge.
Neither Solomon or Parco have ever been charged in the murder, but Solomon becomes angry again when the defense points out that, like Parco, he was also granted immunity from prosecution in return for his testimony against Carolyn.
There's no court of law that's going to punish or judge you.
What I know will judge me, okay, is perhaps not a court of law, and rightfully so, because a court of law shouldn't judge me for this.
The entire Carolyn Warmus case had changed dramatically with one phone call. A 911 call made to police around 7 o'clock in the evening by a woman believed to be Betty Jeanne Solomon, saying she was being attacked in her home, leaving the operator unsure whether she'd referred to her assailant as he or she.
This is what she put in her notes.
And that raised the possibility that Betty Jeanne's murderer was a man. Perhaps even her own husband and Carolyn's lover, Paul Solomon, who was indignant at the suggestion.
All right, I'll accept my guilt for the affair. I only hope to God that, that when I'm punished and judged, that you're punished and judged for what you've done here.
Carolyn still isn't sure if Solomon could have committed the murder and pinned it on her.
Do you think that Paul Solomon was the one who killed his wife?
Well, now I certainly have a lot of questions.
Betty Jeanne's 911 call would also cause the medical examiner to change the time of death from between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. to between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., suddenly giving Carolyn an alibi.
She was on her way to see Paul Solomon.
Warmus's phone records entered into evidence by her defense team would confirm Carolyn made a call from her home at 6:44 p.m., just before driving 45 minutes to meet Solomon around 7:30, only about 15 minutes after Betty Jeanne's 911 call.
Therefore, you wouldn't have been able to make it over to Paul Solomon's home in time to commit the crime.
Right.
During trial, the prosecution argued those phone records were phony. But in the end, the defense had apparently raised enough doubt to save Carolyn from being convicted of Betty Jeanne's murder.
Jury was hung 8-4 in favor of conviction.
Then ultimately, 2 years later, there would be a second trial, a virtual replay of the first, except for one crucial new piece of evidence. That glove found lying near Betty Jeanne's body at the crime scene would resurface.
So that was the principal difference between the two trials. I mean, presence of this quote-unquote missing glove.
Lead Detective Constantino recalls it having blood on it.
I believe, from my understanding, there was blood specks found on the glove.
This is vital evidence that could identify the person who killed Betty Jeanne Solomon.
But initial forensic testing on the glove at the crime scene was not sophisticated enough to glean any blood at the time. And police actually gave the mysterious glove back to Paul Solomon.
He just took the glove and his other items of clothing that were there and put them in a box and stored them in a closet.
So it wasn't even taken from the home,
No.
the glove?
No.
The prosecution and defense both wanted the glove back for the first trial, and Solomon was implored to look for it.
He claimed that he searched high and low, did every square inch of that apartment, couldn't find it.
But Solomon just so happens to stumble upon the glove after the first trial is over.
And lo and behold, Paul comes in and he says, I found the glove. It was on a shelf in the closet in the master bedroom.
Just as Carolyn Warmus is about to be tried again.
Literally on the eve of trial, the second trial.
The glove would immediately whip up a storm in the courtroom.
In comes the prosecutor and they say, Judge, we have a glove, a missing piece of evidence. The glove that we didn't have at the first trial, we now have.
The prosecution wants forensic tests conducted on the glove, hoping it will find blood belonging to Carolyn Warmus. But there are some serious questions about the glove, which the defense claims suddenly appears to have a lot of blood on it that wasn't there when it was found at the crime scene.
How do we know this is the same glove from the crime scene photos? How do we know that this glove is in the same condition as it is today as it was in the crime scene photo? How do we know how long the blood's been on there? And where's the log, Judge? We don't know where the glove was all this time.
And so little attention was paid to the glove when it was found at the crime scene that it's not even clear if it was a man or a woman's glove.
We all wanted to test it.
But the judge refuses to allow forensic testing, stating there didn't appear to be enough blood for DNA testing, and saying the glove's whereabouts can't be verified during the time it was missing.
These new lab employees supposedly said that so many people have handled the glove. Jurors, district attorneys, people in the lab and stuff, that it would be more difficult to get a pure DNA sample.
Despite this, the judge does allow the glove itself to be entered as evidence, raising objections by Carolyn's attorneys.
And I don't see how, in any way, shape, or form, it ever should have been introduced into evidence at the second trial.
And the prosecution pounces on it, producing a receipt showing Carolyn had bought 2 pairs of gloves just months before the murder.
And the gloves were of the same manufacturer and model as the glove that Paul Solomon found in his bedroom closet.
But nothing else links them to the glove in question.
We don't know whether it's the same color. We don't know anything else about the glove other than make and model.
Surprisingly, even the lead detective agrees.
There was no definitive evidence tying that blood on the glove to either the victim or Carolyn Warmus, and there was no definitive evidence tying that glove to Carolyn Warmus. It was just a circumstantial evidence, as is everything else with the case.
Despite that, after hearing from a staggering 55 witnesses, the jury in trial number 2 unanimously convicts her of second-degree murder.
Do you remember what went through your head when you heard guilty?
I was just in shock. I was just in shock.
William Aronwald, her defense attorney in that retrial, was shocked too.
It was stunning. I mean, we really thought that we had done enough and made enough points during the trial and during the closing arguments to establish, if nothing else, reasonable doubt.
Carolyn blames it all on that glove.
Do you think the glove was the linchpin in the second trial that led to your conviction?
Oh, definitely, definitely. It was the big difference.
For nearly 30 years, Carolyn Warmus has been proclaiming her innocence. Most of those years spent behind bars for the notorious Fatal Attraction murder of her secret older lover's wife.
I've always maintained my innocence. I've always been steadfast with that.
But Richard Constantino, the lead detective in the case, has just as steadfastly maintained Carolyn did kill Paul Solomon's wife, Betty Jeanne.
I know she did. She did this homicide.
I have to ask you.
I asked Carolyn the recurring question for what could be the last time she'll have to answer it.
I'll ask you again. Did you kill Betty Jeanne Solomon?
Of course not. Absolutely not.
Carolyn says it could turn out to be her last testament.
So at any time, I could stop breathing and swallowing and having a heartbeat and, in essence, die.
Warmus claims she has a brain tumor that is not malignant, but still life-threatening as it continues to grow.
Do you think you're dying now?
Well, my symptoms are rapidly getting worse.
So this could potentially be your last interview?
Could be.
Carolyn, now 54, tells me she's been offered surgery while in custody and initially refused. But now she's finally agreed to have it done while incarcerated, even though she comes up for parole again this summer.
Did it ever cross your mind to admit to the crime, even though you maintain your innocence,
right,
to try to get paroled so you can save your own life?
Well, no.
That's something that you won't do.
I don't know if that's quite... I'm definitely not accepting responsibility for the crime, by any means, for certain.
The one-time school teacher is now getting unexpected legal help to try to prove she's innocent while she's still alive.
You can only select a few people to help, and you've chosen Carolyn as one of them.
Yes.
Jeffrey Deskovic, who once had his own rape and murder conviction overturned by DNA evidence, now uses the millions of dollars he received as compensation to help others like Carolyn, who he believes was wrongfully convicted.
So there's a lot of similarities to your case here.
Yes.
Deskovic hired attorney Dennis Kelly to try to get Carolyn one last appeal.
So you believe 100% that she's innocent?
100%.
But once again, proving her innocence comes down to testing that mysterious glove found at the crime scene. But Kelly is met with continued resistance from authorities.
They say they can test it, but it will consume all of the material. I don't know why they're saving the material. It just doesn't make sense.
But Kelly continues to fight to test the glove with modern DNA technology that wasn't available at the time of the murder or Carolyn's 2 trials.
And I hope I can do something or find something that can help Carolyn.
And he believes the test will either prove it is not Carolyn's blood on it or show that it's not even the same glove that was found at the crime scene.
I can't understand why the DA wouldn't test the glove. Why are they opposed to it?
Carolyn is suspicious.
What's in there that they're hiding?
Carolyn believes that whether the glove is real or was planted, it would still exonerate her.
If the DNA comes back for the blood as somebody else's DNA, then that's the killer.
Crime Watch Daily reached out to prosecutors about their reasons for not testing the glove, and they had no comment. But Carolyn Warmus tells me there's a chance she could still be released from prison without even having to appeal.
I'm actually being considered for something called compassionate release.
And that would free you permanently?
Well, yes, yes.
Giving her hope that she can continue her battle to clear her name as a free woman.
I try to look to the future. I try to look forward. I try to look at the bright side.